morning, everyone, and welcome to the Orange County School Board's Rule Development Workshop, which has been scheduled for today for the purpose of discussing the following school board policies: IJ, Instructional Materials; IJL, Library Materials Selection and Adoption; KEC, Challenged Materials Policy; and IMB, Teaching About Controversial Issues. The school board will be hearing public comments on the aforementioned school board policies. Board members are attending in person or telephonically, so let me take roll call. Member Gallo?
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. Member Lopez?
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning. Member Colbert?
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Member Gould?
Good morning.
Member Felder? That's right. Member Felder is en route. We'll check in with her when she gets here. Dr. Castrodental?
Good morning.
Good morning. Vice Chair Byrd?
Good morning.
Good morning. So all members are present except for Member Felder, who we are expecting. I want to remind the public that the board members will not be engaging in outside electronics or digital communication during the meeting so that we can focus on the meeting itself. To my fellow board members and district staff and members of the public who may be speaking, make sure your microphone is turned on and speak directly into it so that our YouTube viewers and Orange TV viewers can hear you clearly. We will now rise for a moment of silence, and I'll invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And now for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a number of ways that people can participate in public comments, either here in person, via email, or telephonically. We do have one speaker in person, and Mr. Palmerini, callers?
No, Madam Chair, there are no callers.
No callers. And we will take public comments as we address each of the policies individually. Generally, our practice is we will hear from staff. They'll give a presentation. Then we'll open it up to public comments because we want to hear from the public before the board begins discussing the matter. We have the benefit of public input before that discussion. And then we'll go to board discussion, and then we'll move on. We are not voting today. But we are taking guidance from the board as to whether or not we are on course to move forward with a formal vote at a future meeting. With that said, I will turn to Dr. Vasquez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. Our team is ready to present changes to 4 of our policies based on the feedback received from the board a few weeks ago, and then after the presentation, we'll open it up for discussions. I'll turn it over to Mr. Rob Bixler.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Jacobs, members of the board, Dr. Vasquez. Today we'll be discussing the rule development workshop today. Our agenda, we'll go over the timeline. We will do a summary of actions, proposed revisions, next steps, and then questions and discussions. The tentative schedule, the cabinet reviewed electronically the policies in question. We had our work session on July 12th. The rule development workshop is today, pending discussion today, and if everything goes well, will be for board approval on August 30th, and then it'll take effect once it's approved. We'll be reviewing the IJ Instructional Resource and Materials policy, the IJL Library Materials Selection and Adoption, IMB Teaching About Controversial Issues, and KEC Challenged Materials Policy. The first revised policy we'll be looking at is IJ, which is Instructional Resources and Materials. And Chair Jacobs, our plan was to go through the highlighted sections that we had gotten feedback on and make sure that we reviewed those with you. If you have a different way to do this, but that was our plan, just to go through those highlighted yellow sections. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me clarify, yes, but if board members have areas of concern outside
Absolutely.
of those, even if it's in the existing policy, this is our opportunity to try to perfect it as much as possible. So if we're not comfortable with it, please speak up. We can slow down if we need to, because getting it right is more important than getting it fast.
Absolutely. So we'll go through and we'll go to the yellow sections, but if we need to go back a slide or two, just let us know. We'll go back to the policies to make some more revisions, okay? All right. Ms. Kibbe?
Good morning. Okay, so the purpose of policy IJ is being revised to include language from recently enacted laws and to clarify the process by which a parent or resident of the county can object to the board's adoption of instructional materials. So revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content, formatting, and terminology edits consistent with statutory language, as well as the input and direction that we got from you during the July 12th meeting. We made 3 changes to this policy based on guidance, and that first change is on page 5 of the policy. One of the concerns stated during the July 12th workshop was the advanced studies courses and how those instructional materials were impacted by the instructional materials policy. So we added the following language. The instructional materials for College Board Advanced Placement, International Baccalaureate, Dual Enrollment, and Cambridge Assessment International Education are not selected by the board. The instructional materials may contain college-level content. Participation in these programs is voluntary. An additional change that we made is we used a generic term for the associate superintendent who oversees curriculum rather than the specific title of the associate superintendent for curriculum and digital learning, as that title is subject to change with reorganizations and such. In section 4A, we also referred specifically to statutes section 1003.42, which was not there previously. So those are all of the changes on page 5. And then on page 7, we changed under the objections to supplemental instructional materials already in use. We changed the name of the form that is being referred to here to the request for reconsideration of media center materials or other reading materials as identified in policy IJL, media center materials, program selection, and challenges. So that was when we renamed the form because it had little bit of a wonky name last time. And those are all of the changes that we made to this school board policy based on your input from last time.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The form that we're referring to, that was emailed to us from general counsel, is that form being adopted also?
Yes.
Okay, so the form's not in front of us, but one concern I had with the form is one of the forms, it specifically referenced Deborah McGill by name. And as you were just pointing out, in terms of wanting to be generic, I thought that giving an individual's name and email address in a policy was not the best approach. I don't know what the solution to that is. There is a specific position, but we don't have an email address, I don't think, associated with that position. You all following what I'm concerned
Yes,
about?
Yes,
we're looking at it right
Okay.
now.
So I don't know where we go with that, whether we could have an email address for the position so that if for any reason Ms. McGill is gone for an extended period of time, somebody else would be picking that up. I don't know how that works. Dr. Vasquez.
Madam Chair, we can establish an email account that's specifically for that purpose, and then we would just assign the individual.
Perfect. Perfect. That way we can reassign individuals without having to change the policy. Great, thank you. Another question I had, so I appreciate the language that you put in about AP classes, baccalaureate classes. What I'm not sure about from a legal standpoint, and I guess this question is probably to Mr. Palmerini, but I know this is not where we want to be in terms of the statute and to some extent maybe the lack of clarity or ambiguity, but do we have the authority to, even though it's not our instructional material, the fact that it's not ours, does that take us off the hook for not complying with Florida statutes?
I wouldn't say we're not complying with Florida statutes, because there's also Florida statutes that specifically authorize these programs, and specifically authorize these programs as curriculum, and specifically authorize these programs in order to be eligible for scholarships and the like. So I think the more specific statutory provisions authorizing these programs
Thank you.
would get us where we need to go.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. And I think I had one other. Do we have an estimate of when we're going to have this information on our website in a searchable format? Is there a time frame for that?
The instructional materials are already on all of our school websites in
Okay.
a searchable format.
searchable
So every
format.
school website has an Excel spreadsheet that includes the adopted instructional materials for their grade band.
Okay. Okay, let me go to Vice Chair Byrd.
Are we, we're not taking public comment before we discuss,
Oh, my gosh.
are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair.
No, it's okay. I just
I
wanted to,
just
before I
outlined
got
that.
into all this.
Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak? Ms. Farrell. I'm so sorry, Ms. Farrell.
Before you start my time,
Yes, ma'am.
Clint wasn't aware because, like I said, it wasn't advertised,
Yes.
public comment, so he wasn't able to sign up for public comment, and Jen walked in at 10:02, which you hadn't started the meeting.
Okay.
But she was told since it was after the meeting, she couldn't sign up.
Okay.
So
No, we'll go ahead
There are other
and,
people other than me here.
yeah. Thank you. I was surprised. Mr. Palmerini, there's no reason I can't accept their public comment, is there?
Our general policy is we have the sign-up time, and those folks are here all the time. So you can waive the policy if you choose, but, and then the notice of these rule development workshops and the policies are also sent to CTA regularly as part of our advertisement process. But if you choose to waive the policy, you may do so.
So let me explain to the board why I would. Ms. Farrell or Ms. Cousins, I think it was Ms. Farrell, sent me an email explaining that what was sent out in the notification didn't include how you would give public comment. And so there was some confusion. And this is a time when most citizens actually aren't here for these meetings that we have at 10 o'clock in the morning. So because of any confusion that could have been created by our notice, I would like to entertain the comments. Is there any objection? Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, of course, my comment is going to be on the definition. So you guys added the provision, or you're talking about adding the provision for advanced placement, and that would protect advanced placement. And we know that any book written into the ELA best standards will be protected. Those books are 70% written by white authors. They are also largely written before the year 2000, which that's also a time prior to us really allowing for marginalized voices to get published. And they're mostly written by straight white men. So, and the only religious text available in the ELA standards is the Bible. So you would only be protecting those textbooks with this. As Mr. Palmerini had just said, if it's in standards or if it's written into something that has more a more robust language, then it's protected. So what we would be doing, without at least acknowledging that there could be literary value or educational value to sexually explicit language or depictions in a book, we're automatically we're allowing the policy to be discriminatory towards LGBTQ+ and BIPOC voices. And I'm not okay with that, because we have a governor that says we don't have a problem with systemic policies that would alienate or marginalize certain voices. This would be that policy. So I would just ask that you consider, if you must persist with a definition, to at least add that lacks literary or educational value, because then it extends the ability for supplemental materials to be considered that might also contain the same language that's in, or sexual experiences or depictions that are in Romeo and Juliet. And we know there's sexual content inside the ELA best standards that will be protected. So this would just allow for us to make other protections for other voices. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next speaker. I'm just let you all decide what order you're going in.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for letting us speak. So I won't belabor the point because pretty much everything she just said is what I would have been saying. But just to reiterate that the way it is defined currently, I think might be a little too broad and could create a situation where some things aren't allowed that actually do have value for our schools, and that end up hurting students because they don't have access to what they need. The only other thing that I would suggest, and it might not be very popular here, I'm not sure, but I would suggest that maybe we're moving a little bit too quickly. I know we've had some meetings on this before, but when there are still questions around policy that I think the board already shared the previous one, and when we don't have a lot of guidance from the state, perhaps we should slow down. That would be my only suggestion on this. I have a couple other comments for the other policy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I also agree, and I'll send some written comments as well regarding the other statement about, I don't think that if we got the announcement of being able to comment here, I may have missed it. So, but I may have some other comments that I'll send later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can we all know who Mr. McCracken is, but can he just state his name for the record, please? Number one, and can we get a comment card filled out from him just so we have it
Yeah.
for record-keeping purposes?
That's a good point. Thank you.
Sorry, yes, and I'm not sure what's required, but Clinton McCracken, president of CTA. Do you need my address there? 1020 Webster Avenue, College Park.
Okay. Any comment there, Mr. Palmerini? I'm going to ask, are you the one doing the clock?
Yes, I
Okay.
am.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was running last time.
Yeah, no, it was.
It was? Oh, okay.
Then I stopped it when he stopped, and then he
I
came.
wondered,
yes.
because I thought he had more time left, and I
No, he
saw
did.
0.
He did.
He did, and then you walked away, and yeah, got it. No problem. Got it, no problem. Ms. Cousins, are you up next?
I'm going to wait until the library section.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. Vice Chair Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you. My first comments are on page 5, and they actually go along with the public comments that we received. And I know that we had this discussion last time, but, you know, going back and looking at what we have so far, where it says any instructional material containing pornography or otherwise prohibited by section 847.012, which, which, you know, I read completely, excuse me, and that description is pretty, that statute is pretty clear about what is, you know, considered obscene, because this chapter is called obscenity. And one thing that it says specifically in there is, while it does say the visual representation or image of the human body with nudity and sexual conduct, sexual excitement, blah, 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 but it also says which is harmful to minors. So it's saying all of those things, and it also has to be harmful to minors. And also with any book or pamphlet, printed material, same thing. All those things are listed, but it says and harmful to minors. So I feel like this statute is very descriptive. I don't know that we need another definition. If we do, then I agree with our public comment that I think that we definitely need to add something that says literary or educational value, just because I do also have concerns. You know, this board has one mentality towards this, but another board may not, and that just the definition I feel that we put in there is real broad, and I'm concerned about other books that may be that this may fall under. So those are my comments about that one section. I also, in the 2 more paragraphs down, it says, if it is found that an instructional material does not meet the criteria set forth in this policy, or that any other material contains prohibited content. I'm confused about any other material, why we have that one phrase in there, because this particular policy is just for instructional material, and we say that in that sentence, so I'm not sure why we need to say any other material, because that concerns me that someone could pull any material in the school, including, books and classrooms or whatever. So that one sentence concerns me a little bit. And then on page,
I got an idea.
yeah,
To see if, let's
Okay.
stop on both of those and see if staff has any comment or council has any comment.
So I guess I'll lead off on the pornography definition. The definition that was suggested, let me try to get the microphone in front of me so you can hear me. The definition that was suggested on this is concerning to me, because if you look at the Florida statute, it's the definition that was suggested by the member of the public is concerning to me. If you look at the Florida statute, it says that we are to prohibit pornography or materials prohibited by 847.012. Allison, that PowerPoint that's on the thumb drive, I've done a small PowerPoint just to go through some of this. This will help clear up some of the questions that I think you all have. So it'd be easier just for me to do it this way. And Allison, I'll tell you to go to the next slide when I'm ready.
Okay.
So you can go to slide number 2. Oh, you're getting in. There you go. So the statute says any material used in a classroom, made available in a school library, or included in a reading list that contains content that is pornographic or prohibited under 847. That "or" word is bolded and underlined for a very important reason. It's a disjunctive phrase in both grammar and in the law. So it means either or. So if it contains pornography or it contains materials prohibited under 847.012, you have to prohibit it. And that becomes important. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Apparently I forgot to stop the clock. I apologize. Because the statute says if it finds that if the school board finds that there is prohibited content under subparagraph B, which I just read, the school district shall continue the use of the material for any grade level or any use for which such use is inappropriate or unsuitable. So if you can go to the next slide. If it contains pornography or materials prohibited by 847.012. So while we didn't have a specific definition of pornography, again, we borrowed the one from child pornography. And go to the next slide, Allison. We have the definition of sexual conduct here. I'm not going to go ahead and read it again because I've done it once, and that was surely enough for a public meeting. So we will go to the next slide, but it is there for your perusal. So now going to 847.012, this is your point, Vice Chair Byrd. This statute says it has to be harmful to minors, right? And that is the standard for 847.012. But that is not the standard for pornography under the case law that we have. So next slide. And this 847.012 says an adult may not knowingly distribute to a minor on school property any material described in subsection 3. Again, subsection 3 is the material that is harmful to minors. Next slide. Harmful to minors has a definition. And by the way, just so we've heard harmful to minors and obscenity, those are the identical standards. They are one and the same, and Florida case law does say that. So harmful to minors, it's something that predominantly appeals to prurient, shameful, or morbid interest, is patently offensive with the prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole with respect to what is suitable material or conduct for minors. And then C is the important portion. Taken as a whole is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. So the definition that was suggested to you is it has to have some serious literary or artistic value. That is the obscenity / harmful to minor standards. The bottom line is, and I've read the case law on this, you can have pornography that is not considered obscene and not considered harmful to minors under the statutory definitions. If you adopt the definition that was suggested to you, you would be importing an obscenity standard into pornography, and the legislature intended it to be two separate things: pornography or materials prohibited under 847.012, which is harmful to minors, or obscenity. So my fear is if you adopt that definition, you would be allowing materials that are pornographic in nature that would otherwise be prohibited by law because you're utilizing the more stringent obscenity and harmful to minor standard. So if you go one more slide. That's the
More stringent
definition.
or more lenient?
I meant to say more lenient. I apologize. And that's the obscenity definition, which you see is exactly the same as the harmful to minor definition. Allison, next slide. Again, if it contains either pornography or obscene materials or materials which are harmful to minors, the usage must be discontinued. And again, pornography must be removed even if they don't meet the legal definition of obscenity and harmful to minors. So that's my fear in adding that definition. I understand completely why they wanted to add the definition, but I think it expands pornography beyond what the legislature has intended.
So let's stay here for a minute. We have a follow-up question from Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think on the first slide, you list the statute that depicts age appropriate. I have to tell you, I agree with Mr. McCracken on this. We're not even going to get guidance from the Department of Education until 2023. They're not required to give it to us by statute till then. The guidance that they give us could severely impact this policy that we're putting forward today. And this does feel rushed to me. Like pushing forward this policy without clear direction from the Department of Education, which we know will be coming to us, feels like we're setting a policy, and what it may mean today may mean something different once we're given that guidance. And so I do feel rushed. I feel like I don't know why we're in such a hurry to adopt this policy until we have all the information available to us from the Department of Education, because I think we're going to be back revisiting this very shortly. And we need to make sure we get it right. It's too important not to get it right. We need to make sure that we adhere to the law, and we need to make sure that any policy that we adopt is good for our students and appropriate for our students. So I agree with Mr. McCracken. I think we're rushing this, and I don't know that we need to. I think we need to take a deep dive and make sure that we get it right. And I think if we don't, we're just going to be back here come January, February, and we're going to be discussing it again because we're going to have to make adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gallo. I wanted to speak to Mr. Palmerini's comments about the use of the word "or," and you covered the point that I was going to make, that if we change pornography to mean a sub-definition of obscenity, then that word "or" means nothing. If the legislature didn't mean for pornography to mean something different than what's already defined in obscenity or in 847, what is it? 012, then they wouldn't have written "or pornography." And under the rules of statutory construction, when there is some lack of clarity or when you're looking for intent, you have to try to give everything that you see some logical meaning. And so therefore, to make it a subset of something that it is part of obscenity, part of 847.012, means that you've eliminated pornography as a separate definition. So I don't think we can define it as, and when I looked at the language, it would literally define it as what's already defined in obscenity. So I did think that, independent of Mr. Palmerini, I thought what we needed to do was look for some guidance from the statute, because there is no real clear guidance or legal definition of pornography that I could find. So looking to it, there's the definition for minors. And if you take out the word minor, it would stand to reason that that would be pornography without it being subject to having a minor involved. And while it might not be what everybody wants it to say, it is what it says. And I do feel very strongly that we need to abide by this law. And I understand very much Ms. Farrell's comments, and I think she makes some very good observations about what happens with AP and with baccalaureate. And I personally don't think that anybody thought, I'm not going to give anybody enough credit, you probably will, that they thought through this and said that they wanted it to be biased, but I see where she's coming from, but I also see that this is a matter of law, and I also understand where you're coming from, that waiting might be the right thing to do, although it troubles me a little bit that we are in a situation where it is unclear what the direction is from this board. And if we're going to continue to have material in our libraries that by most people's standards would be pornographic. And I wanted to clarify one other thing. It says if it contains content, if the material contains content that is pornographic. That's pretty clear language. It does not say if the material is pornographic on the whole. It does not say if it has pornographic but has some value. It's very clear. If it has content, that means any content. It doesn't mean the entire thing. So I think that gives, I honestly, when we were discussing this in the very beginning, I hadn't discovered the statute that referenced pornography separate. But I think that that's pretty clear, that it's supposed to mean something different. It's supposed to be the content, not the whole that we're looking at. And I worry about not giving some direction, but I will tell you where we are right now. I am not comfortable with this language, and I'll talk later about my discomfort with the library material in particular. Let me go to Vice Chair. Do we want to come back to you? Yes, we do, because you had the second issue that I wanted to stop on.
Madam
where you
Chair,
had yes.
can I just add one thing?
Follow up.
Board Member Gallo, I certainly understand not wanting to rush it. And I certainly wish that the legislature, when they had passed 1467, would have had the training ready to go for our personnel prior to January 1st. The only concern we have from a legal perspective is the effective date of that bill was July 1, 2022. And so we could have a parent coming to challenge us between now and December 31st about, hey, a material in your library is pornographic. So from that standpoint, it would be better, in my view, if we had some guidance for our district staff to, when applying any rules to any decision-making to a challenge, to have some guidance that we give them than not. I would certainly agree with you if there was some lack of clarity and we were waiting for a little bit further guidance from the state that was going to come some sort of before January. The state is engaging in rulemaking on, library materials, and they're engaging in having in what format books have to be posted on school websites on August 26th. The State Department of Education is going to be doing that. So we'll see if anything comes out of those rules. And you're right, we could be back here in January or February if the state gives guidance redoing the policy. But given the fact that there could be challenges in the interim period, that's why we're bringing it forward now.
Okay, let me go back to Member Byrd on the second issue, because I think I wanted to stop there too, because you brought up something I hadn't even noticed, and I don't know what it's supposed to mean.
Yeah. In letter D, where it says, if it's found instructional material does not meet the criteria set forth in this policy, or that any other material contains prohibited content. I just wanted to get some clarification about why we have that in there, any other material, since this is
Yeah, Vice Chair Byrd, that's a
specifically
great question. We were talking, and it's actually pulled right from statute.
That's
That's
in statute?
That section is right from statute.
And that statute is displayed on your screen right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we pulled it straight from statute. So it's probably a holdover from the old policy.
Okay. And then just real quick, for a comment on the definition, if we move forward, then I'm just not understanding why we feel the need to define pornography when the state has not defined pornography. If we can't even find a good definition for pornography, that's where I'm confused about why we are trying to interject a definition for pornography. I don't have a problem saying pornography, that we don't want pornographic material included in these materials, but I just don't know why we're trying to put a definition in there if a definition is not clearly defined anywhere else. So that's my comment on that.
Mr. Palmerini?
As I've told you the last time, not only will you not see a state statute that defines pornography, you won't see a federal statute that defines pornography. Justice Potter Stewart in the decision of Jacob Ellis in 1964 says, "I know it when I see it." That's the extent of the guidance we've gotten from the courts. You know, it's that we're not going to try to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. That's what the guidance we've given. So that's awful hard for the folks who are going to be reviewing these materials. To give them a standard that says, hey, what the United States Supreme Court says is pornography is, you know it when you see it, they probably are going to need more guidance. That would be the reason why I would say we're attempting to define it here in the closest analog that we have, which is the child pornography definition.
Okay, want to move on to your next one? Oh, I have a thought on why that language is there. Now that you pointed out it's in statute. So we have instructional material, we have library material, and then we have classroom libraries. And so perhaps, because I was thinking maybe we don't need it because we have it covered under libraries, but the issue of classroom library material has come up over and over again, and I really haven't had an answer because we don't speak to that. So I think that could be the reason for that language. Any other material, because we cover libraries, instructional. What about other materials that aren't in the library and they're not instructional? Possibility. Or I may be giving them more credit, but that would be one reason for keeping it in. Yeah. Next.
Think about why I had this circled. Sorry. Supplemental materials adopted. Oh, okay. This is just like kind of a formatting question. Number 9 on page 7. We have a paragraph that talks about objections to supplemental instructional materials already in use. And then we have a whole nother section of our policy that is about objections to instructional materials. So I'm just curious about why we even have that number 9.
So number 9 is there to point people in the direction of the challenge, how to follow the challenge process for library media materials specifically, and then point out that there is a difference overall. So the next section is about objections to the instructional materials process, so textbooks specifically, versus 9, which is the media center and other reading materials challenge process, which is different.
Okay, I see that. I think then maybe my question was why do we even need to have that in this section, in this policy, if we have that already in the other policy? That was my question about that one. Thank you.
No, I actually think that's a good observation because people that don't know there's a library section, separate policy, and start seeing library intertwined here, might then assume this is the only policy. So it might be better to clearly delineate and not confuse. Member Gould, you're recognized.
I want to go back to pornography. So I understand why we would want to define it, but what if our definition is more restrictive than how it would be interpreted? What if another district interprets it completely different? What if the courts would take into account an entire body of work instead of one paragraph out of a piece of literature that is developmentally appropriate? So I have real concerns of us singularly defining it, even though it would be prudent from an operational standpoint maybe, but maybe not in the long run for the best interest of our students and for our operation.
So since you were looking at me, I would assume that it was directed at me. The courts could always look at this definition and say, we're going to we may decide an issue differently. Obviously, we try to draft our standards in accordance with what we think a court looking at this would do. And you look at the case law says, listen, state has a compelling interest in protecting the physical and psychological well-being of minors, which extends to shielding minors from the influence of literature that's not obscene by an adult standard. So the courts have said there is a difference between obscenity that is not protected for adults or minors. Pornography is protected for adults, but the courts have said we will protect children from pornography even though we will allow pornography to be viewed by adults. So could another board come in, look at this, another school board in the state look at this definition differently? I'm sure they do. We have 67 different districts and not all of our policies are the same. Does that necessarily give me pause on our definition? No, it's the best definition we have given the guidance we've gotten in case law. It's the best definition we have with respect to the lack of guidance that the state has issued on this. So I completely get the concerns. And I wish there was a case law, because you guys know it. If there was a case, I would be up here citing it to you saying pornography for minors is this. And it would there's not. This is always the most dangerous area that we have when we try to define these things. But given our best guess of what the case law and limited guidance has said, this is what the best that we can come up with.
Follow up on that, Mr. Palmerini. So, and to my fellow board members. So here's my opinion on this. I don't want to define this and have it be the precedent. I would prefer, and I know we don't necessarily want to be the case study on this, so to speak, but somebody's going to be in this state. There's just no question in my mind that this is such a polarized issue that it's going to have to go through the court process before we truly figure out where it's all going to land in the short and maybe the long term. I don't want to restrict us in a way because we're being so conservative and so precautionary that it could actually hurt us more, and what we want to be able to do for our teachers, which is I trust that our teachers always have the students' best interest in mind and that they're going to bring forward things that they think are relevant for the time and highlighting the educational component while engaging and really connecting with those students. So I am not in favor of us including a definition when it has not been defined yet by the state what the definition of pornography is. Going back to your original statement is I know it when I see it. What I think is and what you think is and what the chair thinks is and what people sitting in our audience think is probably are different, and until the court says what we think it is, it's all up to interpretation, and I'd like to leave it that way.
Follow-up? Yes, Mr. Palmerini?
So the one point is there's two ways that this could get solved. One, we could go to the courts, right? The other way is the DOE comes in and says, hi, we've gotten a report that you have this book in there, and we consider it to be pornography. And you all knew or should have known that it was pornography, and we are now sanctioning you for having it on your shelves. Those are the two ways that this could come to you. And I always, obviously you all have heard me say this, my job is to protect this board as much as I can from a legal perspective.
You do a great job.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. But those are the two ways that this can happen. This isn't just somebody suing us in state court saying, or bringing a challenge under the Parents' Bill of Rights saying this is pornographic. The state could come in and say, we think this is, and you should have received.
So another follow-up question to you, Mr. Palmerini. If the state were to pick something out of a book that says it's, again, out of context, but out of a book, even if it's Romeo and Juliet, what is our recourse if we are sanctioned? What is the process to appeal that sanction?
You could file an action in state court saying that they were without authority to do so. The standard would be very deferential to DOE because it's the state statute that has been adopted, and DOE is the agency the agency that has been designated to interpret state education law.
Mm-hmm.
So they would get the benefit of the doubt more often than not with that. And we haven't been down this road with school districts challenging sanctions from the state. That is a highly unpredictable thing. But the standard generally is they will get deference in their determination.
And I understand all that, and I certainly don't want pornography in front of our students, but I am very cautious about us restricting interpretation too tightly or it being used too broadly. And I don't see an easy path to resolution. So I think at some point we have to follow the model of Rosa Parks and say, nope, we're not going to stand up. So, and without making it, adding to laws that we don't need to add to, if that makes sense. That's just my opinion. I don't know if my fellow board members agree.
Thank you, Member Gould. Member Casterdental.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member Gould. I concur. Our libraries are not full of pornography. Just want to get that out there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
This is just a political device to divide, but we need to deal with it. I agree with my board members who have said we need to slow down this process and wait for the DOE to give us guidance. That doesn't mean we can't have these discussions, because I think these are important. And this isn't something that we can just discuss once or twice. I think these discussions are important. So we don't have to wait till January to have these discussions. But if someone believes, or the DOE thinks that we have a book in our library that they believe or someone believes is pornographic, we have a challenge process they can go through. And that will come before a committee of reasonable adults, and using the community standards for that school, I would hope that they could really examine the contents of a book and determine if it's appropriate or not, or full of pornography, or has whatever scenes that they find offensive. But again, I agree we should not define something that is so difficult to define and that has so many different definitions, as Member Gould mentioned. So I support slowing down the process and just kind of relying on the procedures we have now for a challenge. I don't know if we've had many challenges out there other than the ones we've had recently that didn't go very far. So I think we're getting worked up over something that's not really a problem.
Thank you, Member Castellano. Vice Chair Byrd stepped away. I'm sure she'll be right back. I see, I definitely see the reason for postponing it, and the hesitancy that I have about postponing it is that when we do have challenges coming forward, one, I was surprised that DOE sent out a memo or correspondence clarifying that citizens could take their challenge directly to DOE. In fact, that was the first thing they listed. If you have a book that you're concerned about, you can send it to DOE. I didn't think that would be number one. But since it's listed as number one, I can see a lot of people going to DOE first. I don't know exactly what that means, but it does mean that they're going to be very engaged and watching very closely if they send it back to us, which is what they're supposed to do under the statute, so that we can make a determination. So I know where I think the legislature is likely to go on this, and it's not likely to be on the lenient side. So I am also concerned about triggering laws that overcompensate because we don't take this seriously enough to define the issue. And then the last concern that I have is that if we have a book challenge in one, and this is, I've always had this concern, if we have a book challenge in one school and the decision is there's nothing, it doesn't violate, it's not pornography and it doesn't violate 847.0.012. And another school defines that it is pornography. Okay? Then we have, and that stands and it doesn't get challenged. So we have the position that there's a book that's pornographic in one school. So if it's pornographic, it shouldn't be in any of our schools because it's not just a violation against us, but I mean, this is at least a misdemeanor to provide pornographic content to minors. So how do we have 210 schools getting to define pornography independently? Shouldn't this board define pornography if we are potentially going to be in violation of state law and we're going to have 210 schools that could define it differently? I'm really struggling with that. I know it may not seem likely that that happens, but I'm not sure what happens moving forward. I do know that there's at least one or two contents that I've read in books that I will not publicly say. I would not feel comfortable. I think it would be totally inappropriate for me to say that. I thought about maybe we should poll or survey parents to get a sense of, because there's this idea that different communities have different standards for pornography, and you know it when you see it, but there's things that I've read that I would not put in a poll. I'm not sure that we could legally put it in a poll. I don't know. I just know this organization wouldn't put it in a poll. And so if I'm that uncomfortable with something that's in a book of ours, then shouldn't we be defining it in some way? And we can't, I strongly believe we can't define it the way 847 is, because that's nonsensical to say that it's either obscene or obscene. It's obscene or pornographic, so it has to mean something different. But I also understand that the board may not reach a consensus on what is pornography, and so I wish that we could get a quicker answer out of DOE on this issue, because ultimately this issue is going to be decided by the state, and it's going to be decided after districts do something they don't think we should do. And then you become the lightning rod on the issue of which schools in Central Florida or which schools in the state of Florida are giving pornography to their students. And that's not the reputation that I want for our school, and I know it's not the reputation any of us want for our schools. That's my comments. Member Lopez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to express my support of not being so in a hurry to complete this policy. I feel that it's not only clear the fact of the definition, the definition of pornography, but also in page 5, the consideration of the ethnic, socioeconomic, cultural, religious, physical, and racial diversity of our society in accordance with Section 1006.31 Florida statute is not clear either. I tried to go to the Florida statute 1006, and I would love to have more feedback on that one from Mr. Palmerini, because it's not clear either. And I feel that in my case, if I, try to work this out and put it in the agenda next with my fellow school board members, I feel that I'm not gonna vote in favor of any type of policy in the agenda, something like that. I'm gonna feel like I'm not an honest person. I don't believe this preemption is clear. I believe that it's a vehicle to transform our students' mentality. But that's the way I feel, and I respect, every opinion as always. But I don't feel comfortable with this policy at all. I don't see. We have a lot of questions during the work session. We're still having the same conversations, the same questions. Public comments say the same thing. So it's not only us, it's also our constituents having the same questions over and over. And another question that I have, the first one about the statue.
Member Lopez, do you want to stop and try to get an answer for that, or you want to do all your questions? It's up to you.
Okay, let's
Okay.
start with that one. Yeah.
Okay. So who can? Okay, who wants to speak to that particular section?
Member Lopez, could you repeat which page it was on? I'm
Yeah, thank
sorry.
Yes, page 5 on
Page-
top.
Thank you.
The consideration of the ethnic.
One second on that.
Mr. Palmerini, in our red lines, we did include the wording directly from statute. So it does say, the statute says include only instructional materials that accurately portray the ethnic, socioeconomic, cultural, religious, physical, and racial diversity of our society, including men and women in professional, career, and executive roles, and the role and contributions of the entrepreneur and labor in the total development of this state and the United States. So that is directly from
Yes.
statute.
Yes, because accurately appropriate. Can somebody describe that? Can somebody, it's kind of, okay, how, so the same questions on that one.
So that
Palmer?
statutory language comes from the duties of the Department of Education and School District Instructional Materials. So it would be Florida Department of Education who would adopt instructional materials that portray the ethnic, socioeconomic, cultural, religious, physical, and racial diversity of our society. All of those things. That would be its responsibility when it is adopting its instructional materials that it's going to approve for usage statewide. That is all things that they should consider. As you see, sometimes that's what's the word I want to use for it? Fluid situation, depending on when a math textbook was adopted versus what they found in it after it was adopted. However, that's FDOE's responsibility statutorily.
Yeah, so it seems to me like it's very subjective. That's the way I feel. My other question is about, can we write a letter asking for clarifications on these questions that we are having here in our conversation?
Dr. Vasquez.
Madam Chair, if I may, DOE has published that they are having rule developing workshop the 26th of August. So we may want to pause and see what the outcome of that rule developing session is, and then hopefully it would be approved at their September board meeting, and then come back and revisit. They may have definitions, they may not, but it would provide us with more information and at least know what, if any, further guidance we would receive from the state at that point.
So
Thank you.
what is the process do we follow in case we wait until that day? So we have to start with work session and then how it works?
Well, we wouldn't have to, but we probably would, because we would have new information that we would probably want to discuss. And I have a handful of concerns about the library material that, frankly, I wasn't comfortable going forward with as it is. So that would be something we could work session as well. I think we're here, and we probably ought to move through this process, though. But if we're not comfortable moving it forward to a public hearing, a final vote, this is the time to pause. And I think that's a really good reason, given the timing of it, that we're not talking about a January input, but hopefully something much sooner.
That would be a way for us to get what we hope to be more clarification
Yeah.
from the state. And then if they don't, then at least we know then these are the issues that we then as a board
Yes.
need to still work through, primarily the definition of pornography. So we currently have a policy in place to challenge materials, so that would continue. And then we would be able to come back after we know more about what the state is recommending.
So in the meanwhile, can we send a message to our instructional personnel, to our teachers, librarians, so they feel more relaxed and less, feel less pressure? Because I think that they're feeling a lot of pressure, because just by thinking about be exclusive and not inclusive, or being not fair, can we send any type of message so they can feel more comfortable?
What we can do is remind them of the current policy that exists and the process for the challenge of any material, as well as remind them that they can reach out if they do have questions or concerns about any of materials that they are using. Our staff has been assisting during the first few days of school and during pre-planning and answering questions. Absolutely, we can do that.
Thank you. That will be all.
Thank you, Member Lopez. Member Gould.
I am definitely in favor of tabling this until we get more guidance and not creating boundaries that may box us in a way that it's not good. And I appreciate your comments, Chair, about wanting to ensure, the protections, but at the same time, I think we're going to have to go through the process if something doesn't come out of the DOE in order to figure out what those boundaries really are. And it's unfortunate, but I don't think that with the conflict in even classic literature to what interpretation can be, we can really know that. And right now, under this, I think even things we would all consider classics could be challenged.
No, I agree with you that they could be. I think there's a good chance when we're all said and done that they may be out of libraries across the state of Florida. But we'll wait and see what ends up happening with the direction of DOE and the direction of the legislature next year. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to jump to that conclusion. I'm just saying I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah. And a follow-up to that, when you look at the highest functioning creative societies in history, whether when they ebb and flow, it is because there is well-rounded thought, discussion, process, arts, math, science, music, all working together, and an appreciation of outdoors. We're losing our edge by all of this debate right now, unfortunately. We're losing our global edge. And I know that seems like a stretch, but it's really not. When you look at what it takes to build grit and thought and resilience of kids and people in general and societies. And I don't want to get ahead of the race in being constrictive to delivering brilliant minds that are wonderful citizens, that are our next inventors, our next leaders, our next caregivers, in any way, shape, or form. So that's, in a couple of words, makes a big difference in the process. So.
Okay. Member Gallo.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I obviously agree with my fellow board members about taking a pause and making sure that we get this right. I do, because I think we're making this a little bit murky. We're talking about instructional materials, and we already have a process in place where there's a committee that reviews our instructional materials currently, correct? Yes.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and And the vast majority of instructional materials that we use comes from the Department of Education's approved website, correct?
Correct.
So we're already doing everything that we can to ensure that we're abiding by the law without this policy. So there's really no reason for us to push forward without taking a collective pause and waiting for the rules that come out of the Department of Education. Because we're doing everything within our power to engage parents, to bring parents to the table, to make sure that we're using appropriate material. We're using the approved list by the DOE. So if they're going to ding us, then they're dinging us on instructional material that they have listed on their website as approved. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Member Colbert.
Thank you. I'm just going to try to be a bridge here. I think we're, for the most part, all on the same page. I think our only responsibility currently that we must do is make sure that our policies are aligned to statute. Those portions of these policies where we need to reference the statute or use statutory language, that is our responsibility. Pushing it further, I think, is premature. I do believe, because this is a fluid issue and we are in the middle of culture wars, that we are going to have to come back and address it. You all will have to come back and address it, probably in January.
Not necessarily. Might be before November.
It could be. But if we're expecting some direction by the end of the month, we could push back that next meeting. That's easy to do. But I do also think that we are going to, at some point, and it's going to need to be with direction from the state, a definition. I think it's really providing some standard, and it's probably going to come from the state. And whether we agree with it or disagree with it, that's going to be the bottom line. And I'm also hoping that we might have some people in Tallahassee that could help us with some of these issues as well. But yeah, our only responsibility is to ensure these policies in front of us are aligned with the statute. The other issues, it is fluid. We are going to have to come back and readdress it. So.
Thank you. Member Felder. I did.
Yes.
I did.
Thank you, Chairperson Jacobs. I just sort of kind of want to reiterate what some of the other board members have said, because I just can feel what teachers are going through. And administrators, if they have teachers who are somewhat like I was, sort of rebellious in terms of choosing what I was going to teach. And I just hope that we do our best as a board, and I believe that we will, to ease the pressure on some of them, because they are concerned, because many of them are as astute as those of us who pay attention to legislation, and they are concerned. And again, it's nothing, I mean, until we get clarity, this seems to be an exercise in futility, until we get clarity as to what the policy is. Secondly, I don't know how many people are listening. Most of them are teaching, but Superintendent-elect, I'm hoping and believing that we will get information out to ease the minds of our teachers in terms of the material. So I'm thinking of stuff right now, British Lit, Andrew Marvel. Off with thy girdle, so I think that pornography, but I'm just saying. So that's my hope from this board, that we'll get that clear. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I think we have consensus on delaying any action to move this forward, and we'll make a decision after we hear a little bit more in the rulemaking process about whether we're bringing this back for a work session and when. Okay? So I still think I think we'll reach the same conclusion on the second policy, but we do have members of the public that came and have taken time, so I think we should go through the presentation and hear from the public on ILJ or IJL, whichever it is. Yeah. Yes.
I think this is John's. Okay, school board policy IJL. Oh, thank you. Library material selection and adoption. Policy IJL is being revised to include language from recently enacted laws to clarify the process by which a parent or resident of the county can request reconsideration of instructional materials in libraries and to incorporate language from policies IMB and KEC, which are being recommended for repeal. Revisions have been made to the existing policy language to include content formatting and terminology edits consistent with statutory language, and we've accounted for your direction from the July 12th workshop. One of the major changes that we made is consistency, which I believe School Board Member Byrd pointed out last time, so thank you. We consistently use the term media center because that is how we refer to our school libraries, if you will, as media centers all throughout the district. So you will see the word media center appear all throughout our policies, including in our title. Oh, sorry. Thank you. All right, so it should be on your screen now. I apologize about that. So all throughout the policy, you're going to see media center instead of library, the proposed title change, and then I believe there was one more change that we made throughout for consistency. Those are the two changes that we made just consistently throughout. The first large change is in section 3. 3A, which is on page, these pages are not numbered. I apologize about that.
Oh, don't do that to us.
Oh, sorry, the
Okay.
pages aren't numbered. I
All right.
apologize.
This would be a good time to pause and just please, everybody, if you're giving any presentations,
Sorry.
any documents, page numbers.
Yes,
Okay.
agreed.
I mean, that's not us scolding to you. It's just like everybody in the room, everybody in the universe of OCPS, page numbers.
Agreed. They may have just gotten cut off when we were PDFing these. So under section 3, criteria and procedures for selection of media center materials, section A, the standards to determine the propriety of media center materials shall be in accordance with the section of 1006 Florida statute. So we just changed that to say materials. Section 3B, so towards the bottom of the second page, where we had incorporated school board policy IMB, we made some significant changes there based on the July 12th workshop. So the language has changed to the following. The board may install a secular program of education, including but not limited to an objective study of the Bible and of religion. As such, media specialists may purchase religious materials and/or materials about religious figures for the purpose of such objective study. While using the materials, no employee may indoctrinate any student with the viewpoint of a particular religion. And then the next item, when selecting materials, whether purchased, donated, or otherwise made available to students, the media specialist shall. And that was just kind of cleaning up language at the direction of the school board members from last time. We also made sure to consistently use the word materials, as that was inconsistent in the previous version of the policy. Next major changes in this section are under the challenges to media center materials and other reading materials, which is on page 5, if it had a number. Beginning with the preamble, under that policy, it says the following procedures shall be followed when the appropriateness of media center materials or other reading materials is questioned. Hereinafter, challenged material. This does not apply to state-adopted textbooks in use in the classroom. So clarifying that this policy is just for media center materials and other reading materials. Section 1 ends with the following individuals may file a challenge. So just trying to clean up the language a little bit there. Section 2, this was referring to the temporary removal and the feedback that we received from the school board last time. So this now reads that challenge materials shall not be removed immediately. Such materials shall be available for student use pending a final decision. Notwithstanding the foregoing, only the superintendent or designee may temporarily remove a challenge material during the pendency of a request for reconsideration if the superintendent or designee believes it will be disruptive to the student learning environment if the challenge material were to remain available. The next section begins with the process, the school level informal request for reconsideration of media center materials or other reading materials. This section just removed some language that was there previously. A parent, legal guardian, or resident of the county who has a concern with the use of media center materials or other reading materials must first request in writing a conference with the principal, director, or assistant principal / assistant director to discuss the use of the challenged material. The principal, director, or assistant principal / assistant director will schedule the conference within 10 working days of receiving the request. The next section, you're going to notice that we consistently refer to the name of the form, so you will see that change throughout this section of the policy. The form is called the Request for Reconsideration of Media Center Materials or Other Reading Materials. So you're going to see that change several times throughout the rest of this policy. Section 4, school level formal request for reconsideration of media center materials or other reading materials. The request for reconsideration of media center materials or other reading materials form must be filed by the parent, legal guardian, or resident of the county with the principal, director, or assistant principal / assistant director within 10 working days of the conference referenced above in the informal request process. The only other change we made here is we referred to other reading materials to make sure that the name of the form was consistent here. Section B, again, making sure that we're consistent with the form titled there. Section B4, item B4, one parent or legal guardian, excluding the parent or legal guardian or resident of the county requesting the reconsideration as selected by the principal, director, or assistant principal / assistant director, would be on this committee. We removed resident of the county based on direction from the school board on the July 12th workshop. In preparation for its review, the School Literacy Council shall receive a copy of the challenge material. This was something that was not previously included in the school board policy, so we wanted to make sure we added that based on your direction from last time. Again, consistent use of the name of the form that supports this policy. In reviewing the challenge material, the School Literacy Council shall, item E4, consider written input from students when available. That was added based on direction from the school board and discussion from the school board from the July 12th workshop. In the next item, item F1, I apologize, is the addition of the time. So this determination shall be valid for 5 years, which was also based on direction for the school, from the school board from last time, and you'll see that reflected in the next item as well. At the district level, you'll see similar changes here to make sure that we mirrored the school level process. So again, changed the words to make sure it said media center materials or other reading materials. We use the associate superintendent who oversees curriculum rather than the specific title for the associate superintendent of curriculum and digital learning, as that is a title that could change. So you see that several times throughout. To mirror the School Literacy Council makeup, we also removed the resident of the county and retained the one parent or legal guardian representing the school grade, but not from the originating school. In preparation for its review, these changes also mirror the School Literacy Council and include a copy of the challenge material that the District Literacy Council would be receiving. Further changes are just making sure that we use the consistent name of the form. And then in section G, in reviewing the challenge material, the District Literacy Council shall consider written input from students when available. Again, that was added based on school board member input and mirrors what happens at the School Literacy Council level. The same goes for the time period. Again, mirrors the decision at the School Literacy Council level. And then the following changes in sections in the last two components of this section are the associate superintendent who oversees curriculum rather than the specific title, so something more generic. And then finally, at the school board appeal level is the, again, who oversees curriculum, the associate superintendent, and then the school board shall review the challenge material, and again, consistent use of the name of the new form. And those were all the changes that we made to IJL based on your input.
All right, let's take public comment. Ms. Farrell?
Hi again. So I sent you kind of a lot of what we had concerns with in this policy. I just want to make sure that I take the opportunity to just point out that if you were to use the definition of pornography as you guys have it currently written there, any written or verbal or visual depiction of sexual conduct, you are essentially saying any sexual conduct. And the statute does not say anything containing sexual conduct. It says anything containing pornography, and there is a difference. And so there is a difference, and that difference is intent and the intent to arouse, and that could be the entire work, or it could be why, like say I know Beloved would be an AP curriculum and protected, but there's a sexual situation that happens there, and it's there for a purpose, and it's not for the purpose to arouse. And so your definition is not complete. And that's all I want to say about that. Section 3 could use a lot of additional language. We suggested what we saw in Osceola and Clay County policies. Going through, the addition of IMB being incorporated into Section 3 did not quite make sense because the controversial issues policy, which is much more thoughtfully written in other counties, is actually to protect conversations that happen in the classroom. And this is a policy about library books. And so it doesn't make sense to move a policy that's supposed to protect controversial discussions in the classroom into a library policy. So that was that issue. The form and the things that are questioned, our current form actually has that the complainant signs off that the material was reviewed in its entirety. It seems we're taking that away. Now, we didn't see an actual copy of the form, but wanted to make sure that that stays in there. And then also, other forms in other counties ask what the desired level of censorship is to some degree that the complainant's asking for. So they give the complainant the opportunity to restrict their own child, to remove the book in its entirety, or in some cases mark it as sensitive content, which would mean that a child can't check, or a student can't check out the book just on their own during self-checkout. They'd have to have a conversation with the librarian first. And then if you guys are doing this, tiered policy, you could add it to a restricted content designation where if parents want their child on a restricted content profile, then they could opt their child into restricted access to the library. And then that's what you would basically make this distinction as. So for the parents that do want more restriction, they have that option.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. All right, who are we going to hear from next? Mr. McCracken, I'm sorry. Clinton McCracken. Has anybody ever done that before, called you Mr. McClinton?
All the time.
I've never done that before.
Totally okay. I'll answer to any of them. So I just have a couple of questions. Again, I would say ditto to everything that Stefana just said. I'm wondering just in the title, where we say other reading materials, I'm a little worried that this could be construed to be talking about classroom libraries when the previous work session, I thought that the board was saying that we aren't talking about classroom libraries, but just media center materials. So I'm just concerned that, because my understanding is with regard to classroom libraries, unless they're being read as part of a lesson, that the statute is not saying that those should be restricted. So that's one concern. And then I have a question about section 3B, where it mentions the Bible, why we are specifically talking about that sacred book and not perhaps lots of other sacred books. So I'm just confused on how that's written that way. And and then the last thing is there's a section that's been struck out, and I'm not quite sure why. And that's on the next page where it says, and it's the double I, where it says the consideration of the broad racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and cultural diversity of the students of this state. So I'm confused as to why we're removing that language, which seems like it could have been helpful. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Good observations. Thank you. Ms. Cousins.
Good morning. So since we're talking about pornography, and particularly in the libraries, what I would like to really caution you all about, because I know that some people up here have rushed to the judgment that our all-time favorite book, Genderqueer, is pornography, which it's not. It has never been proven to be so. But I want you to be intentional if you decide to create your own definition of it, because of the message that the board sent by bowing down to the Proud Boy when he read the out-of-context excerpts out of the book back in October, he's run with that narrative that that book is porn. And he's targeted my organization. He's targeting me. He ambushed me at a candidates canvassing event last night, following me with his camera, screaming that I'm reading porn to my kids because of that book. So if you're going to make a definition, be intentional, because that book is not porn. And I let my 12-year-old read it because they are non-binary and it was life-affirming to them. So I really want you to think hard about it before you make any decision like that, because it's going to have impacts like that are going to go beyond just targeting me. It will target other people in the community as well. And I think that we want to protect our families of OCPS. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Cousins. And I regret that you've gone through that experience. You might be surprised to know that I'm going through the same experience, but I signed up for this and offered to serve in public office. So it comes with the territory, but I do regret how hostile it's getting on the outside. I will say there are different opinions, and the question with Genderqueer isn't whether the book as a whole is porn, it's a question of whether it contains any pornography. And I think there are a wide, this is the problem with not having a definition of pornography. It hasn't been proven, but how can it be proven when there is no definition to prove it by? So it's unfortunate that we have a state law that prohibits something without a definition of what it is exactly that is prohibiting. And it leaves us all in a guessing game. And the question is, where do you want to fall on the side of guessing? And the board will, at least to some extent, come down on different sides of where they want to fall on that, I suspect. But all with the best of intentions, I know. So that's the last of our public comments, I believe. And we'll go on to, but all very worthwhile comments, and I appreciate them. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do agree with many of the comments that were made by our public speakers today. I do have some questions. I think it was B on page 2.
Is this the one or is it the next B?
Let me see if there's a next B. I think it might be the. Yeah, so in this, and I think it was Clinton that brought this up about the Bible. So maybe we can answer his question. But did this come from statute? Because and I know this is nitpicking, but I'm curious as to why we would use the term indoctrinate.
So
Thank
I
you,
can
Beth.
answer
Paul
that.
Marini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first part, the first sentence is directly from statute. So when it references the Bible and other religion, unfortunately, that is 100345 subsection 1, and that is a reproduction of it. So obviously, the second sentence says we can purchase religious materials. That would be plural. That would be different religions for the purpose of such comparative study. Indoctrinate is not in the statute, but that's a general summarization of the case law as it currently stands today, that we can't indoctrinate public school students with particular religious teachings in the classroom. So that was the purpose of including that language. That is on shaky ground. I suspect that we'll be revisiting that at some point in the future with some Supreme Court decisions. But as of today, you cannot indoctrinate public school students with a teaching of a particular religious viewpoint.
Okay. There's not another word we could use.
The problem is with the word indoctrination.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because we agree.
Objective, yeah.
It's already in there as
Objective
indoctrinate?
study, while using no employee may.
Yeah.
I mean, I just indoctrinate. I feel like if we're going to indoctrinate any students, it's going to be for them to be proficient in reading by grade 3, not anything else. So I don't know if there's like another word that we could use.
We can attempt to use another word on it, but that's the case law language that we get out of it. That's why it was used. It was used purposely.
Okay. All right, and I know that I feel about this policy as I did the last one, that if there's going to be rulemaking that happens in a week and a half, that we pause until we determine what that rulemaking looks like and what the rules that come out of it. But on page 2, or maybe page 2 is what I wrote down. Is there a 2 on page 2?
None
Nope.
of the pages are, oh, item 2, responsibility and training. What's the heading?
I didn't write it down. I
Oh,
just looked
okay.
at the little. All right, so I'll come back to it when I think of it. I do want to add, I know that we had a conversation about taking written requests from students. I do think that when we are talking about a district council, it's already been vetted at the school site. And by that point, if it comes to the district, it's coming to the district because it's being challenged based on a rule or based on the outcome that the school council determined. And I do think at that point, there should be a student on it. If the parent is okay with the student being on that book, if the parent is okay with the student reading that book, we should allow that student voice on that council. I think it's imperative as we go through this, because we are in uncharted territory. This is new to us. We have to follow the law. We're committed to following the law, but we need to do it in the least restrictive manner possible. And to just take a written comment isn't the same as having a dialogue with a student and hearing their point of view as questions are being asked or as that dialogue happens on a committee. And so I know that we're probably going to pause this, but I think as a board, we seriously need to look into allowing that student voice. I just think it's important that we're making decisions on behalf of them. We're telling them what they can and can't do. We're taking away their choices. And I get that that technically it'll be the parents, because the parents get to ultimately choose. But I just think that student voice, we already have the parental voice on that committee. I think it's equally important that we have the student voice. And I've voiced that already. And then just the other thing that I jotted down was just the 5 years. I know that we came down that we didn't want to be looking at the same thing over and over again within a year. And we came to 5 years. I didn't know if maybe we would get more guidance from the Department of Education on the length when they do their rulemaking. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gallo. Vice Chair Byrd.
Thank you. I was just going to also point out the Bible reference, but that was already explained. And then I agree with Member Gallo about that last sentence about indoctrination. I understand that that's where case law is right now, but it's used, that term is used in such a derogatory way towards our educators that I am very hesitant to put it inside our policy and further the use of that word. Just, it aggravates me so bad. So that would be my preference. And I feel like we're already saying it by saying that by saying an objective study. We're already describing that it needs to be objective. We could even add words like factual, unbiased, study of religion, something to that effect. But I just think using that word indoctrinate just further continues the use of that word, and I'm tired of hearing it, to be quite honest. Materials. And materials on page 3, letter D. We struck out and popular appeal. Materials should be considered for timeliness, importance of subject matter, quality of writing, readability, and popular appeal, and we struck that. And I'm just curious about why we struck that, because I think that is, for library books, I think that's a pretty important reason that media specialists also select books.
One of the areas of concern that came up when we were drafting revisions was that there is no legal definition of what popular appeal is, and so popular appeal is subjective. So we removed it because of that.
Okay, maybe we could think of some way to include in the needs of the child, or desires of the students, what they want to read. You know what I'm trying to say?
I do believe that is included. So if you look up at the top of that same page, item 3, consider materials based on reader interest. So we are still capturing that kind of sense of what do you want to read?
Yeah, and actually in that same section up there, I'd also written a note about, with letter V, consider materials that support the academic needs of students and faculty. I'd like to see it also say something about the emotional or well-being, emotional needs of students as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Byrd. That's good. I don't know if it would be, I don't know if this would be the place to throw it in, but I think it's important that we have material that stimulates critical thinking. And I don't know if we could include that. Just put that down for discussion under work session. I do think we need a lot more of that, and I'm interested to hear Dr. Vasquez at some point how we go about teaching critical thinking, because I'm just very focused on how important it is for our students to come out and know to question the things that they read and not to take everything that they see on the internet at face value. I think that's going to be more and more and more important in terms of a skill set. I had some specific suggestions here. Under, I hate it doesn't have pages, 2B. I guess I made that point, right? I should stop belaboring. I hate that it doesn't have page numbers. Under 2B, we say that prior to such training becoming available, media specialists and other personnel involved in the selection of school library materials shall consider the requirements contained in sections 100628, the other two, and then 100640. Those two, 100628 and 100640, I think are mandatory. So I was not quite sure why we used the term consider the requirements when they're binding. Now, 1006.283 and 1006.31, I don't think are mandatory for library materials, but somebody should double check on that. And I want to come back to, when I get done, there were a couple suggestions in public comments. I think Mr. McCracken had a suggestion or a question. I want to make sure those get answered. Did you all happen to write those down? Yes. Good.
Classroom reading materials are
Okay, that's right.
We did surmise that in statute where it says "or other materials" probably applies to classroom materials.
which we think falls under the instructional materials. I'm in, let me back up, 3C, and the list of requirements. Why aren't we requiring the compliance with Florida statutes? I mean, I know we probably set it up above, but we talked about all these other things, and I wasn't sure why we left out the statutes that have to be considered.
I believe it's captured in 3A. Criteria and procedures for selection of media center and other reading materials. The standards to determine the propriety of media center materials shall be in accordance with section 1006.40.
Yes, you're right, and 847, okay. That's the same question. That's a question I already asked about if we have a deadline that we want to put in. Under challenges to materials, media center materials, number 2. It says that the materials shall not be removed immediately. Such materials shall be available for student use pending final decision. So I have 2 concerns here. One, I think that the superintendent should have the authority, if the superintendent learns, whether it's through a teacher or an employee of Orange County Public Schools, I don't know, if the superintendent learns somehow, or is reading a book and says, is this in our library, because I don't think it meets the criteria and it violates either the pornography definition, whatever that ends up being, or the 847, I think the supervisor, in consultation with general counsel, should be able to remove the book and then potentially take it through some sort of a process, but I don't think the superintendent should be precluded and have to wait for a public objection. And the reason for that is that this board is responsible for making sure that nothing that violates law, we have a constitutional obligation to know what's in the library and make sure that there is no violation of law. And if the superintendent doesn't have the authority, if she sees something she thinks is in violation of law, to remove it unless a citizen objects, then I don't think we're going with 3-minute time limits right now for board members, are we? Okay. I think, I don't feel comfortable that we have to wait for somebody to point out something if we know it's in our library. It doesn't seem consistent with our constitutional duty. And along that line, if a material is challenged and it is based on violation of either of those, I know this is going to be very unpopular, but I, from a legal liability standpoint, I feel pretty uncomfortable about leaving something on the library shelves as it goes through a very, very long process. If on the face of it, it seems pretty clear that there's a credible argument to be made that it may be in violation of state statute. So I think that we need to at least discuss some more as to whether or not I don't know, in the county, if we knew that there was a pothole, I should probably not use this explanation, it's probably bad taste, but if we knew there's a pothole, we don't wait until until lots of people complain or there's a violation. As soon as we know there's a pothole, we gave ourselves 24 hours to fix the pothole. And so it seems to me, if you think there might be pornography in the library, or you determine that there's probably pornography in the library, I don't think we necessarily wait to go through a process that could be several months. The other issue is, and it's not clear to me how this is going to work, but what I understood, and I don't think the policy is clear on this, I understood that if there's a challenge in one school, that whatever the result of that challenge, if that challenge is upheld, it's upheld in that school only, and it doesn't trickle, or it doesn't become a countywide policy or determination. It's just for that school, and each school can reach its own determination. And I think if you're talking about appropriateness, that might makes sense, but I think if it's a determination in one school that the book violates Florida statute, then I don't think we can have another school determine that it doesn't. I mean, it either does or doesn't, and if it's determined that it does, then it shouldn't be in any of our libraries. So I think we have to recognize that we are one entity, and we can't have different determinations on what the law is, which comes back to, at some point, we need to have a clear understanding of what pornography means so that we can have a uniform definition, or there is going to be so much subjectivity that we're going to be all over the place. And ultimately, all of those are going to be coming to this board, and we're going to need to decide how we're going to define that so that we can be consistent and fair. And I think that was, no, I think I might have one more. No, that was it for me. Member Casterdental. Did we, wait, did we take care of everything that was raised by Mr. McCracken? We didn't. What was the other issue, Mr. McCracken? And Ms. Cousins and Ms. Farrell, if we missed any of your issues, because I should have taken better notes, but there were some specific things about language that I want to make sure that we at least discuss.
Thank you. There was one line that was struck out. It's a double I, small case I,
Yes.
on the third page, I think, about racial and socioeconomic, recognizing the diversity of our state when you're selecting materials.
Okay. Do we know why that got struck?
Yes. It is, that language comes from 1006.31, and that is referenced in item 2B, and is also in section 1D.
So what you're saying is it is someplace else. It's not
yes.
eliminated, it's just eliminated
Yes.
from there, so it's not redundant.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Farrell, Ms. Cousins, did we miss any of your observations? Thank you.
So the policy, I believe it's 3B that you all were discussing with regards to the Bible, and that's IMB being incorporated into here. And again, I really feel like it doesn't belong in this section anyway. If you refer to the examples that we sent from Osceola and Clay, there are better ways to incorporate all the different types of things that libraries can address and should address in terms of having books available, all the different subject matter. We sent that along to you. The other thing was the challenge form and the things that have been removed from the challenge form. And again, going back to this idea that parents have the right to restrict their own children, they don't have the right to restrict all children. So if you go through this review process and the person's still not happy, you know, having these options that would allow parents that want to restrict their children to restrict their children while still keeping the book available to students whose parents just automatically are okay with an opt-in to the full library is the least restrictive way that you guys can continue and honor parents' rights in education, or I'm sorry, the Parents' Bill of Rights, not Parents' Rights in Education, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thank you. And I was actually going to bring up IMB and your observations on that when we got to IMB, but thank you for reminding us of both of those. So, Mr. Bixler.
Yeah, Chair Jacob, just real quickly, I know that she hasn't seen the draft, but there are two questions on the draft reconsideration. Question 7 is what age group would you recommend this material if it's challenged? And this question 10 is what would you like the school to do about this material? And one of the check marks is do not assign to my child. So it's only, it could be just that individual child. So we did capture that in the form.
Okay. Okay. And then the question, I think, is and we can come to it when we get to IMB, whether or not repealing it is the appropriate
Correct.
thing or not. Member Casterdental?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to weigh in on some of the topics that were brought up. The section that mentions the objective study of the Bible was one I'm like, wait, why is it just the Bible? There are many, I don't know if we should write it I think we should write it in a different way where we do include other sacred texts, the Quran, the Torah, even if they are included in the language indirectly, I think we should make them more direct. That last sentence, again, I agree, we don't need that last sentence. While using these materials, no employee may indoctrinate. I think that's a given. And also, some of the language, like where it says the board may install a secular program of education, that wording seems awkward to me when, I mean, we may not be installing a secular program, is more clear in what we actually do with those texts. So where it says books, papers, or utterances of a sectarian, religious, or denominational character, I think that's more clear. And when it comes to language that we just take from statutes, I think we need to be careful that what we're replacing is more appropriate than what we previously had. And I want to make sure that it's clear, not just for those who are looking to see if we are abiding by statutes, but people who are actually looking for answers in what they can and cannot do. So clarity, I think, is important, not just matching the statutory language. I agree with Member Gallo about including a student on the committee. They can bring perspective about what a student experiences these days, and give us some relevant perspective. I think the other issues were addressed as well. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Member Gould.
So I had two thoughts. One is on the student. Maybe it's an immediate past student, because I think we would be in violation of the law if we found a book to be not appropriate by exposing that one student in this process. So maybe it's an immediate past student or someone that's still in touch in some way with our student body, not too distant, but protects us. Secondly, I want to expand on the notion of the whole parental rights. And you wouldn't know it from the way I've been talking today, but John and I are pretty conservative parents. We did not have Halo in our house until both of our boys were whatever age it said on there. They did not get to read Harry Potter right away in elementary school because I felt it was too dark. But that was my choice. I wasn't banning that book from our house, and even against my will, I didn't get to ban Halo from my house when they got to the appropriate ages for it. But I like this idea of not only protecting our kids and protecting parent choice, but also protecting our staff if we have a mechanism that makes it easy for that choice to give permission or subscribe or unsubscribe. And there's a lot of mechanisms out there right now about that. I mean, we all subscribe and unsubscribe almost daily in our lives to whatever, we look up. They want you to subscribe for life and get information on it. But I like that concept. And I think if we could, as we wait on what the state is going to do, think about it more from that parental choice, so that no matter what your household beliefs are, no matter what you're driven by in your value system, you have the ability to have input in the school where in these more gray matters. So that is just a thought. I know it's not easy, but I don't see a way around without us coming up with a lot of what I feel would be artificial definitions, because they're not in state statute, in order to put parameters around it. But if we put it right into the family's hands, where appropriate, again, this is not a blanket thing. I don't want my kid to learn math, kind of a thing. But where appropriate, I think that meets what I would hope the intent of the law was, of really giving families the choices that they think are most appropriate for their child. And it could be different from one child to the next in a family.
True. I wanted to follow up on the Bible and indoctrination conversation. I think one of the things, Member Casterdental, I would be a little uncomfortable about putting the Bible and the Quran and trying to list, because inevitably we will leave out some religion. So instead of that, it seems to me that if we took the word Bible out and used a more generic term, sacred text, whatever, religious text, some other, we'll leave it to staff to try to figure out what a good definition of all of those would be, so that we are not, just because, as you point out, just because the legislature chose to use that language, I don't think we have to use that language. It's safer to use that language because we can point to where it came from, but sometimes it means that we're owning, it sounds like it's our voice. And there have been times when we've said, we're going to send something out that that DOE has told us, but we are going to have them own it. We don't want it to be our, as if that's our preference. So, and then in terms of the indoctrination, I mean, I think everybody understands. I think I understand where the board is coming from. That word, we hear it over and over again. We don't believe it's happening in our schools. We don't support indoctrination. And so putting it in there is kind of almost like saying, yeah, we have to have a law against indoctrination, where we have now we have a law against teaching gender from kindergarten to third when it wasn't happening anyway. So I think we're all a little defensive about that, and we don't want to seem defensive. So perhaps we could use a term like not used, and teachers will not attempt to persuade students regarding religious beliefs or something like that, with saying the same thing without saying indoctrination. But I think we do need to be on the other side of me says, if it's in there, then when people say we're doing it, we can say, you know what, if somebody out of our 14,000 teachers is doing it, they're in violation of our policy. So if we don't have something clear in our policy and somebody is doing that, and it can happen, 14,000 is a lot, and it can happen, and we need to be able to say we have defined that as not okay. So I think we could use different language. Member Casterdental, do you want to share with us?
I was asking Mr. Palmerini if that separation of church and state is elsewhere in our policies.
Is it?
No, because up until about 3 months ago, we all had a good understanding as to what that is.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sorry for the editorial comment. I apologize.
No, but it's true, and I don't think we should assume that everybody understands why this is here, and it is church and state, and that's why it's here. And it's important that we keep that separation. We wouldn't want a Jewish child or a Muslim child to be in a classroom where they felt like they were, in a Catholic school or something. I mean, that's not right. It's not appropriate. And we all agree with that. We just feel like we're echoing this indoctrination thing, and we don't like that term. So if we could find another way of saying it, I think it should still be said so it's clear to our teachers, don't do this, but call it, there are other words. Member Colbert.
Just a quick, I want to voice my opinion on the student piece. So I completely agree with Member Gallo, Member Casterdental, that students should have some input, but I also agree with Member Gould's comment about putting students in a particular situation. And I think we had some conversation about this during our work session also. I would err on the side of protecting our students when we are in the middle of these culture wars, given experience like, Mrs. Cousins has been through, other people up here have been through. I just hesitate to put them in that position with some of the behavior that's out there. And yes, adults are making decisions for the children, but I think that is the job of adults. So just my 2 cents on that piece. I don't know how we can work out a compromise where students could have input, but I think the decision-making should be done by the adults.
I would agree with that. I do understand your concern about the students becoming targets. And I understand Member Gould's concern when it's we literally are not allowed to give to a student or share or loan to a student something that contains pornography, and yet we haven't made up our mind, and in the process of making up our mind, if it's determined that it does, and then we've just have given it to them, it does, I don't see how we justify that. But the idea of somebody just out of school made sense, but the idea of putting them in that position where then they become a target, I think, is something we should consider. We went through this with the medical advisory committee, and they signed up to give us advice. They didn't sign up to dodge bullets, but they did. And I think this could be more contentious than that. Any further comments on this? And we're going to move on to our next policy.
I forgot to mention that you didn't address two of the things.
Oh, we left off two?
Yeah, and I left them off.
You left them off when you came up?
Well, I put them in the email. And
Okay, Ms. Farrell, come on up here because
it's quick.
people will just hear me talking to myself and they won't know what this is about. Go ahead.
So there's two other things. The
Yes.
substantial disruption, the language that you are using doesn't clearly state what Tinker v. Des Moines addressed. And so it's not just belief of substantial disruption, it's evidence of substantial disruption.
Okay.
And so we had put that in our comments to
Okay,
you.
you're right.
The other one was that, and this happened in Clay County. So at the school level, the principal wrote in a challenge to the book All Boys Are Blue. They did not review the work in its entirety, even though the policy was to review the work in its entirety. And the media specialist objected to the way that the review was run. And so the book was removed from the county and there was no further discussion. And so I just thought this school level appeal should also be allowed by the media specialist, in addition to the person that's bringing the complaint. So whether, that way if the decision to remove the book is made at the school level and the media specialist feels, no, this is appropriate for the school, they should also be able to appeal the decision to the district level.
Okay.
Just because there is
Yeah.
a history that it's been done unfairly, and although this board might,
Yeah.
err on the side of caution, if things go awry and we start censoring more and more, we want to make sure that protection's there.
Okay, I think I follow you. Mr. Palmerini, you look like you're leaning in.
Yeah,
and
Madam
then I
Chair,
wanna-
I disagree with the statement of what the operative law was that she just stated.
Okay.
We don't have to wait for the substantial disruption to occur. If we are relatively sure it is likely to occur, we can take action. So I disagree that we have to sit here and wait for the disruption to occur before we take action. So I have a disagreement with the law on that.
So, Mr. Palmerini, we have some time because this is going to come back to us. I would invite you to produce that evidence to the board so that whether it is you have to have evidence of or whether you believe it is likely to happen.
You'll have the case this afternoon.
Okay.
It's from Dallas. It's the old Fifth Circuit, but it's still binding in this circuit.
Highlighted for us so we don't have to read the whole thing if we don't want to. Thank you. And of course, we invite the same from you, Ms. Farrell. Also, I want to take up the issue of the media specialist. If I'm understanding this right, if the book is turned down, the media specialist, if he or she disagrees, would have the ability to appeal the decision. Board's thought on that while we're here? Because we're going to come back and probably have another workshop, but I want to give the staff some grounds to work with. So Ms. Farrell's suggestion was if the media specialist, at the outcome at the school level is that the book is denied, book's off the shelf, but the media specialist disagrees, does the media specialist have the right to appeal that decision to the district level? Or is it only the person who brought the appeal that has that right? Huh? You think anybody should have the right?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I think anybody who disagrees with the decision should have the right to take it a step further. Anybody at that school or anybody that's in knowledge of it disagrees with the committee decision should have the right to bring it forward to the next step.
So you would say any citizen, any resident that's eligible to bring a challenge has the right to appeal even if they didn't bring the challenge?
If it's in statute, if it's in statute that we allow, which it is, citizens or parents, then yeah, I believe that it's we should allow appeal of a decision that they believe to be incorrect, regardless of what that decision is.
Okay. Member Castellano?
I agree that we should allow others to appeal, but maybe on a limited basis if they're parents of students at that school. I don't think we just open it up to any citizen to appeal a school-level decision. We'll be in never-ending appeals.
It's all one appeal process. I mean, it's not like it's going to ping pong back and forth. The issue is the only person that has the ability to appeal the person who brought the challenge, or is there anybody else? And the suggestion from Ms. Farrell was the media specialist, if he or she disagrees, could appeal it. Member Lopez.
I think that the media specialist is the expert. I think that after analyzing, because if not, I agree with board member Casterdento, because at the end, somebody needs to, say this is the reasons why we shouldn't ban this book or exclude this book to be, part of our media center. We need experts on these topics, and sometimes just because, and this is something that I don't know bothers you, but something that bothers me is the fact that if I believe that that book is good, that doesn't, it's not enough reason to ban a book. And we're gonna find constituents or people that don't even have children in their system complaining about books. And they're not even there, they don't even have children there. And for me, that part, I don't know, as a parent, concern me a lot, because I don't want somebody complaining for a book that they don't even, I don't know, I don't want I try to be politically correct, so let me be more professional. But, I think that we have experts. And the librarian at this point, the media specialist, is the expert on that topic. And at the end, after analyzing all the facts, all the content of the book, the appropriate age, the pornography that I still don't think we have anything like that in our school system. So that type of information, I think that's the expert. That's what I think. So I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. So you know what I think? I think we're not going to land that plane today, but I think it's a topic that we need to put on the list of things that we're discussing at the work session. Okay? Because I don't think we've even had, normally we have a little bit of time to kind of think through and massage it a little bit more, and I'm not sure that was on everybody's radar screen. And thank you for that. All the information, I did read it. It was comprehensive, and it was helpful. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just, I know that we're going to discuss it at work session, but what if the media specialist gets it wrong? I mean, it should at least be a parent as well. That's all I'm going to say on that. If it should be the media parent or media specialist or a parent that attends that school, not just one person. Because if a book gets banned and then the media specialist agrees with it, and then other parents are like, well, wait, I don't think this book's inappropriate for my child. Again, we're restricting other children. We're making decisions for other parents' children. So that's my two thoughts. Back to disruption. I know that you've given Mr. Pomerini some direction, but if we could, and I don't want to cause any trouble, but I mean, we need to define disruption. What does disruption look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Because that's very interpretive. And so if we're going to pull a book or we're going to do something because it's disruptive, we've got to define what we believe to be disruptive. And I know
Like the
that we've been going back and forth about defining words today, and I agreed with Member Gould about defining pornography, but there's got to be some clarification because it's too subjective. So I know. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. Mr. Bixter.
I just have real quick, just for I'm clear when we take this action back for us.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to the media specialist having the ability potentially to challenge or question the decision, in the policy, the media specialist is on the committee.
Right.
So they're a member of the committee.
Yes.
So if they're part of the committee and the committee decides a book is not appropriate, you want us to look at that the media specialist has the provision to go outside the committee and challenge that?
Yes, that's something I think we should bring up at the next meeting. Is there anyone other than the person who brought the challenge that has the right to appeal other than the person who brought the challenge? That was redundant. You know what I'm saying? And one suggestion was it would be the media specialist. Let's say the media specialist said, this book should remain on the shelves, and he or she was voted down. Should that person have the authority to go make their case to another, or have they already had their vote?
Okay.
So there's, it's a credible argument either way. I can see reasons for saying that person was the person who chose to have it in and gets one more shot at it. I can see arguments for that person already got a chance to make their case and vote. I'm not going to take a firm decision. I think one of the benefits of all of us coming together is that as we debate things, we learn from each other, and you start thinking more broadly, and it's a very good thing, and that's why we make decisions as a board instead of individually. So I think we should come back and have that conversation.
Thank you.
Member Cobert.
Those were exactly my notes, that the media specialist is on the literary council. Therefore, it is redundant, so that is something we'll need to revisit.
All right, member or vice chair.
I think at one point when we were at our last meeting, we discussed this very topic because I had a concern about the informal meeting between the principal and the parent. And my concern was, well, what happens if the principal just caves to this parent? What was the safeguard? And I don't remember where that ended, but that was my concern then. And I think it seems like we had a resolution then when we spoke about it, but now I don't remember what it was. And I don't know if that is that the media specialist is also in that first informal meeting with the principal and the parent.
We'll go back and we'll check that.
Thank you.
That's a good one, yeah. We'll go back and we'll check that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I do remember that conversation.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
Member Lopez.
I just want to make a positive comment about after having these controversial conversations, because we have controversial policies here to discuss. I hope our students see this as a motivation to read more. And, I think that, wow, now that DOS is just fighting to ban books, let's read more, So, yes, so I expected to see more strong readers outside, in our school system, so it's just that.
Member Castrodano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm thinking about the different outcomes of a council or committee looking at a book and trying to establish a continuum of least restrictive to most restrictive, so that if a parent goes to a principal and has a concern, that they wouldn't just jump to banning the book for everybody, that your first step would be limit my child. And then if the parent feels like they must go to the next level, then they can initiate that literary committee. And then they're looking at, I don't know whether it's appropriate for everyone at that school, but just kind of coming up with ways to allow access for the most number of students at the end of that continuum. Just a way to kind of look at how we're dealing with this. That's all.
All right. All right, anything further on this? If not, we're going to move on to the next policy.
All right, the next policy is IMB, teaching about controversial issues. And this policy is being recommended for repeal since it is being incorporated into policy IJL.
Okay, public comment.
So as I stated before, we don't believe that this policy should be incorporated into the library policy, that other districts have used the controversial issues policy to make sure that conversations can happen. So I'm just going to read some of the language from their policy. For purposes of this policy, a controversial issue is a topic on which opposing points of view have been promulgated by responsible opinion or likely to arouse both support and opposition in the community. The school board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues, provided that there is use in the instructional program. And then there's A, B, and C. So A is related to the instructional goals of the course of study and level of maturity of the students. B does not intend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. C encourages open-mindedness and conducted in the spirit of scholarly inquiry. Controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by the students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of classroom instruction and is not substantially disruptive to the educational setting. Controversial issues may not be initiated by a source outside the schools unless prior approval has been given by the principal. The board recognizes that a course of study or certain educational materials may contain content and/or activities that some parents find objectionable. If, after careful personal review of the program, lessons, and/or materials, a parent indicates to the school that either the content or activities conflicts with his/her religious beliefs or value system, the school will consider a written request for his/her child to be excused from the particular class for specified reasons. The student, however, will not be excused from participating in the course and will be provided alternative learning activities during the times of which the parents requested absences. The board recognizes the importance of respecting the religious and constitutional beliefs of its students and their parents, as the term parents is defined in Florida statute. With that in mind, with respect to district co-curricular programs, okay, so then it goes into other stuff happening outside the classroom. The point is, it addresses and protects freedom of expression, freedom of speech in the classroom, especially during these moments. I feel as if it would be a huge disservice to the community to remove this policy and not to actually incorporate better language to protect our teachers and our students, their right to discuss controversial issues in the classroom, and really promote critical thinking and the development of critical thinking. My kids are young. They're in elementary school. I see where this is going, and this is a concern. It's my parental right to express those concerns, and I appreciate you allowing me to have those today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, board members. Member Gallo? I wasn't sure if this was old or new.
So two things. I'm not certain that we should repeal policies since we're pausing on the olive policies. It seems like we need to have policies in place until we land the plane on the policies that we're pausing. So we might want to pull back the repeal is my opinion. And I do like the idea, and I do think that we need to review what other districts are doing in regards to adhering to the new laws that came out of Tallahassee to make sure that we're looking at all avenues when we come to figure out our policy. I always think it's good practice to look at what other districts do as well.
Okay, Vice Chair?
I think Member Gallo just said I was going to say. I agree. I think if we're gonna pause on the other ones, then we should just pause on removing this one. I did want to, which we can cover this when we talk about it again. But I did want to hear the reasoning for wanting to repeal from legal.
So a couple reasons. One, this was being incorporated in the other end of the policy. Second, no public funds shall be used either directly or indirectly for the benefit of any church, sect, or religious denomination or any sectarian institution. That's the Blaine Amendment in the Constitution. And the United States Supreme Court in the recent cases over school vouchers have overruled the application of the Blaine Amendment in the public school context and said, if you spend money on any other private group, you must then also give it to a religious organization as well. So from that standpoint, we wanted to get rid of at least that provision because it's subsequently been overruled by the United States Supreme Court.
Follow up? Sure.
Okay, so that's just that one part, though, but
Yes.
not necessarily having a policy relating to discussing controversial issues in the classroom.
No, the only reason why we did this was, the second sentence was the book's utterances of a religious or secular character should only be utilized for the purposes that we've talked about under the statute, a comparative study of religion, et cetera.
Right, because that
We
is
don't
already
have-
in.
Yeah, this was not to say that folks can't talk about a controversial issue. For the code for teachers, when they do that, they are, under our collective bargaining agreement, they're entitled to do it. Under the principles of professional conduct for the education profession in Florida, we're supposed to ensure that when they do discuss those issues, that they are ensuring that, okay, if they give their opinion, they're entitled to do it. But it has to be, they have to note, this is my opinion. This is not necessarily the opinion of the school board. And you have to give equal time to both sides of the issue when they are discussing a controversial issue. It's not meant to stop that or curtail that in any ways. But what we had in this policy is these two sentences, as you've seen before. We haven't had a more robust version of the controversial issues policy.
Thank you.
Dr. Vasquez.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I was just going to make sure we understood that we're pausing on all of these, but we are having the discussion because we have members of the public that are here to speak to it.
Yes, thank you. And it might, to some extent, I hoped it might inform the work session. Not sure we're gotten very far on that, but so we are on our next policy.
That would be KEC, Challenge Materials Policy, which we are also recommending for repeal since it is being incorporated into Policy IJL.
Okay. Any members of the public? No. Okay, we're good on that. Okay. All right. Anything else, board members? Mr. Palmerini?
Madam Chair, there was an item 4.05 just for information purposes that we needed to get to as well. Members of the board, as you know, I've been corresponding with you since last week about Mater Charter Academy Narcoossee. They have a K-8 school and a high school, both of which we're opening this year and both of which have located in St. Cloud in an old charter school building down there. Obviously, you all know St. Cloud is not in Orange County. We have a charter contract with them that says that it's the model contract that the state promulgates and says any proposed change in location or additional location must be requested in writing to the sponsor, and any new location must meet the same standards contained herein in applicable law. And it also says the school shall not change locations without prior written approval from the sponsor, superintendent, or superintendent's designee. That did not occur in this case. That is a material violation of the charter contract, in my opinion. Also, the charter statute says a district school board may sponsor a charter school in the county over which the district school board has jurisdiction. By moving out of Orange County, we are sponsoring technically right now a charter school that is outside of our jurisdiction. I believe that to be a material violation of law with respect to this school. Now, when school opened last week, we had numerous deficiencies notated with respect to school safety. We have received subsequently, and I've passed it on to the board, there was two issues. The Alyssa's alert system and the training for the threat assessment teams down there. Subsequently, we have been provided with information that they have trained the instructional personnel, the administrative personnel, and the mental health personnel that would be on the threat assessment team. We still want follow-up because there's a fourth member of that threat assessment team, law enforcement. So right now, they would have to get a contract with St. Cloud Police Department to provide the law enforcement services given where they are. We're asking for follow-up on that. Alyssa's alert, the system has apparently been installed. Also, you all saw a list of violations that the Office of Safe Schools from the State Department of Education identified with respect to signage and various other things. They have provided correspondence to the Office of Safe Schools indicating that they have completed that. We have sent our school choice staff down to the school, which is a double-edged sword because, quite frankly, we're sending our staff down to a different county to inspect the facility. But we have sent our Office of Safe, our school choice office down there to confirm whether or not those safety deficiencies have been identified. Dr. Kia Scott is on the way back, so obviously I will get the confirmation from her, and we will pass it along when we get there. If the safety issues are rectified, so there are two bases in law if you're going to terminate a charter that you would do it. One would be an immediate termination for health, safety, welfare violations. If in fact the safety violations have been remedied, I do not think we would be successful in recommending an immediate closure for health, safety, and welfare. However, I still think that they are in violation of the charter contract and of law by moving down there without getting our permission and getting our sign off on it. So I will be in consultation with the superintendent designee about whether or not to bring an item to you at the next board meeting for closure of the charter school. I think there are material violations of law in the contract, but there's things that we have to look at because obviously if we move to terminate, we have to prove it by clear and convincing evidence, and if we lose, we're on the hook for attorney's fees with them. So it's not a proposition that's without risk, but I did want to report to the board where we are today because I don't know that anybody has ever contemplated a charter school getting a charter from one county and then deciding to open up in another county without getting the permission of their sponsor. I think that's completely something that's without contemplation, but I do think that it's something that we need to look strongly at remedying it because, you know, we don't have the relationships with St. Cloud PD and we don't have the relationships with the Osceola County. We have a great relationship with the Osceola County School District, but that would be like an Osceola school moving up here and us having to provide oversight. That wouldn't be right for us. It's not right for Osceola for them to be engaged. So we will be bringing something back to you on this issue, either a recommendation for closure or an explanation to this board as to why we don't think closure is appropriate. But I did want to report to all of you so you had that information.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Palmerini. Member Colbert, is this new? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to take a moment to thank both the members of the public who have come to participate with us today, Ms. Cousins, Ms. Farrell, Mr. McCracken. Your professional demeanor, your research in bringing the facts forward to us, and the manner in which you have done it really help us to make good decisions. So we all appreciate you. And I'd also like to thank my fellow board members. These are very controversial topics. The public is not able to discuss them in a professional and even-keeled manner. What's going on out there is of personal concern to me. So the manner in which this board handles controversial issues, I am deeply grateful to all of you for your professionalism, your thoughtfulness, and the way you go about making these decisions in the best interest of our children and our employees. So just my personal thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Member Gallo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So back to the charter, to Mater. Is it their intent to move back to Orange County the following year?
They are indicating to us their intent is to move back in mid-October.
Oh,
Pending-
so this is only, okay.
Pending the successful construction of their facility.
So their facility's not ready. They needed a temporary housing facility for their students. And students from Orange County are traveling into Osceola County currently?
That is our understanding. There's also a virtual component of it, but there is an in-person component as well.
And Osceola County School Board doesn't want to take temporary custody? I'm just
the indications from I've been speaking with the Osceola's general counsel, and I don't think they want to be in that business.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to the update.
Yes, we all will. All right. Dr. Vasquez, anything further for the board today?
No, I think we've done.
Enough?
Yeah, I do.
Awesome. Thank you, team, for good work on your side. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck to Allison.
Thank you.
Meeting is now adjourned.
Good job.
Thanks.
So can you ask him to be delayed a little bit longer?
I'm done.